Welcome to Week 3, Getting Close to Close Reading. Hi, I'm Hiller Spires. This week, we're going to explore close reading as an integral part of the inquiry-based disciplinary literacy model. As you recall, our inquiry model requires the learner to pose a compelling question, gather and analyze sources, creatively synthesize claims and evidences, critically evaluate and revise, and finally publish, share, and act. We suggest as part of the Analyzing Sources task that students conduct a close reading of at least one text. Before we ask you to engage in a close reading, let's hear from Dr. Tim Shanahan.
Close reading is a concept that is getting a lot of attention these days, and its meaning isn't quite as straightforward as you might think. Historically, the term has actually been used as a term of art in the field of literature studies, English, for a very long time. But in fact, if you talk to folks in math or history, they have their own concepts of close reading. The literary one, the one that has really emerged in things like the Common Core, why don't we talk about that one first? Close reading really talks about a couple of aspects of reading. One, it requires an intensive focus on the text itself. A lot of times when we try to interpret the meaning of a text, we rely on a lot of external information. In close reading, you really want it to be between the reader and the text, and so you want to strip away as much of that external information, information that isn't provided by the author. That's one key to close reading. A second aspect of it, however, that I think is sometimes neglected is that close reading really requires that you come to terms with really multiple interpretive goals. That certainly one interpretive goal in close reading is that you understand what the author says. So if you're reading a short story, that you understand the plot. If you're reading maybe a science study, you might want to understand be able to retell the methods that they used and what they found and what they were looking for and so on. If it's reading an editorial in a newspaper, what was the newspaper editorial board's position on it? And what was the evidence that they put behind their argument? What did the author say? A second aspect of interpretation that you would expect to accomplish in a close read is you would want to come to terms with how did the text work? What was it that this author did in terms of their selection of words and structures, how they organized the information that supported or extended the ideas in the text? Close reading, I think, has a place in the classroom because I think close reading really needs to have a place in our lives. Certainly there are those times when we give a text a scholarly read. That is, we know all about the context and we know where this came from, and we might know why the author wrote it and might know things about the author and so on. But in fact, a good deal of the reading most of us do is reading that you come at relatively cold. You're not going to know a lot of information about. You're going to have to be able to negotiate that meaning with the text independently without a group around you telling you what it means and doing that for you. I also believe that in 21st century society, it's important that our students be able to do more than understand what a text has to say. Understanding how a text works and what that author's point of view is, being able to critically analyze the information are not just nice things to have, they're absolute essentials.
As I mentioned earlier, we suggest that students conduct a close reading as an integral part of the inquiry process, and that they conduct at least one close reading of a text during the analyzing sources phase. Here are a few principles that you can consider as you implement close reading with your students. First, conducting a close reading of a text is challenging. It's easier to talk about our experiences than to analyze text, especially for reluctant readers. Number 2, students need opportunities during class to grapple with challenging text. If we provide much of our disciplinary content orally, then students don't have the opportunity to grapple with challenging text. This doesn't mean that students should be overly frustrated, but an optimal amount of time spent on challenging text can increase reading abilities. Number 3, remember to select short texts that are worthy of a close read. Francis Bacon once said, "Some books should be tasted, some devoured, but only a few should be chewed and digested thoroughly." Think about that quote when you are selecting a text for close reading. Number 4, after you model how to perform a close read, invite your students to practice as they read silently. Students can alternate reading silently and orally and think out loud with a partner. Number 5, it's important to have students read and reread during the process. We found that in our fast-paced, information-rich society, many students enjoy slowing down and diving deep into a text, but they need scaffolds, so it's important for the teacher to model. Number 6, don't be afraid to embrace the text. Students often take cues from teachers' relationships with text. If you demonstrate enthusiasm for reading challenging text, it's more likely that your students will develop a habit of mind for close reading.